In deepest solitude, I found the narrow way, a secret giving such release that I was stunned and stammering, rising above all knowing. These words of Saint John of the Cross, or Juan de la Cruz, are all a part of this spiritual concept that we call the dark night of the soul. What an interesting term, the dark night. This idea of a dark sky without moon or stars, a place of absolute unknowing. And yet when we look underneath it, or even past it, there is that sense and that excitement of limitless possibility. And of course, this idea of the soul being on a journey, and that a portion of its journey is to move through the darkness of night, through the thick of not knowing, and yet aware at a deep feeling level of its immense possibility. One way of interpreting the dark night of the soul is through an immensely challenging, but it must also be transformational time. An experience of being broken open. An experience that could be metaphorically referred to as a crucifixion. A time when we experience betrayal or loss, or even come against who we think our best self is, that isn't enough for what is before us. I think this is a powerful interpretation of the dark night of the soul. Times where we must have faith in that infinite possibility, even in the midst of not knowing, or in suffering, or in pain. Never to ensue the idea that God brings us pain or suffering intentionally as a way to teach us a lesson. But I think a deeper way that I've used for myself is when going through a challenging experience, I'll ask, what am I being initiated into right now? Or I'll say, boy, I sure am being initiated right now. And it has to do with this idea in our promise to soul, in our soul commitment to live our best lives, that our lives can get shaked up. Our lives can break suddenly. And if we have the maturity, we cannot blame ourselves for what is taking place, or even God, but we can say, I have set an intention to live in a greater way, and my life is responding to me through this change, through this loss. And it's painful, and yet it's kind of an initiation, because the loss, the change, the pain can indeed be teaching us what we need to know to step into our next level of becoming. I remember when I was about 18 or 19, I felt I really found my purpose in life getting to run retreats for teenagers. I'd found this faith, and I just loved creating environments for teenagers to speak their truths, to learn about themselves, to embrace their innate wisdom, to build strong ideas about who they are and what they wanted in their lives. And I really enjoyed this work, and I was working in California, but then got the opportunity to work at a more national level. And a lot of the other people that were doing this leadership work were probably like, who the hell is this 19-year-old kid, and who does he think he is? And there were some things that happened. We had a camp where a girl was caught smoking, and the rule was you had to send him home, and I wasn't going to send her home. There were a few other incidents that took place, and I think because people didn't see who I really was, or had judgments rightly or wrongly, that I was too young to be doing what I was doing, I had to resign those positions. It was really heartbreaking for me, because here is what I loved to do most, and it was like losing all of that. And so it was a hard experience in my late teens, early young adulthood to go through. And yet, looking back now, I'm still not grateful for the experience, but if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have taken those important next steps that led to ministry of working with young adults and then of working with adults. And so there was something about that experience that initiated me not only to being less judgmental myself because of what people's age are or anything like that, but also to realize that there was more for me to do, more for me in terms of calling. That's always been with me in ministry. It's, God, I want to serve as many people as possible. And sometimes we have to build some boundaries with God too. There are limits to that because I want to enjoy life as well. But I'll always remember that experience. Another aspect of the dark night of the soul that is probably less understood, but I think more in alignment with what St. John of the Cross meant, is it's a spiritual practice. The dark night of the soul is a spiritual practice. Juan de la Cruz says this: God has to work in the soul in secret and in darkness, because if we fully knew what was happening and what mystery, transformation, God and grace will eventually ask of us, we would either try to take charge or stop the whole process. And the spiritual practice of the dark night of the soul is to allow your consciousness to go dark. It's to close your eyes and have that experience of it being just like looking up into the starless night, the moonless midnight. All we have to do to see nothing is to close our eyes. And this is the practice of the dark night of the soul. It's to release ourselves from the thinking mind. It's to release ourselves from story and from images. And it's to have the faith to be in the total darkness, to have the faith to be with nothing but that faith in the darkness, to see what might come forward. And Juan de la Cruz and other contemplatives of his time believed that this practice was a great way of communing with the divine, not creating God in our own image and likeness, which we often unintentionally do with our own imagining and visioning and thinking, but to wait with faith. Sometimes it's scary. It's always filled with the unknown. Sometimes in silence we have to face fears and anxieties and hurts. But as De la Cruz and other teachers support us with, if we keep going with faith, even into that darkness, not filled with evils, by the way, but with that not knowing, we can have revealed to us a light in which we've never comprehended before. A light of love, a light of consciousness, a light of depth. As we close this session today, I want to share a poem of sorts from Juan de la Cruz. And you can close your eyes if you'd like, but I absolutely invite you to move into this idea of the dark night of the soul as a spiritual practice as we take in these words. I came into the unknown and stayed there unknowing, rising beyond all knowing. I did not know the door, but when I found the way, unknowing where I was, I learned enormous things, but what I felt I cannot say, for I remained unknowing, rising beyond all knowing. It was the perfect realm of holiness and peace, and deepest solitude I found the narrow way, a secret giving such release that I was stunned and stammering, rising beyond all knowing. I was so far inside, so dazed and far away, my senses were released from feelings of my own. My mind had found a surer way, a knowledge of unknowing, rising beyond all knowing. And he who does arrive collapses as in sleep, for all he knew before now seems the lowly thing. And so his knowledge grows so deep that he remains unknowing, rising beyond all knowing. The higher he ascends, the darker is the wood. It is the shadowy cloud that clarified the night. And so the one who understood remains always unknowing, rising beyond all knowing. This knowledge by unknowing is such a soaring force that scholars argue long but never leave the ground. Their knowledge always fails the source. To understand unknowing, rising beyond all knowing. This knowledge is supreme, crossing a blazing height. Though formal reason tries, it crumbles in the dark. But one who could control the night, by knowledge of unknowing, will rise beyond all knowing. And if you wish to hear, the highest knowing leads to an ecstatic feeling of the most holy being, and from his mercy comes his deed to let us stay unknowing, rising beyond all knowing.